Alright, welcome back to part 3. Where we left off was basically finishing off these accents around the main building and kind of touching up on some of the corners here by doing some manual editing. And what I'd like to do is finish up with this model and add the doors, some windows, and garages on the side here. I just figured we can make something like an industrial style building or something, and we'll kind of UV unwrap this thing and move on. That'll be the end of this video. Texturing will be a second video, and as well as applying that to our model in Blender to kind of double check everything. But anyways, let's get back to this guy, and what we're going to do here is go back into edit mode. We're back into object mode earlier, and I'm going to go ahead and click off our normals. So if you remember in the November or Nancy menu here, if you scroll up and down under mesh display and go under normals, we can click that box and get those off. If you wanted to leave them on, you could also shrink them down and kind of turn this on and off as you will. Maybe that's what we'll do here, is we'll kind of turn them down real low like that. Anyways, so the next thing we want to do is basically add some doors and some extra features to this building here. So one easy way to do that is floating geometry. And what floating geometry is adding pieces that are very close but not connected to this original mesh. So what we'll do here is basically add planes on the front and sides that will basically be floating millimeters above our front faces of this wall. That'll allow us to do a couple things here. That'll allow us to texture this back wall of brick and texture the plane with basically a window shape. Now, because we're making a very small building, this technique works. If you're making a large skyscraper with hundreds of windows, this technique would probably not work. You would probably want to do some clever ways of modeling so that you can actually texture a whole face or a whole floor of a wall onto one piece and then just duplicate it that way. And we haven't actually even discussed mirroring, but I would suggest also learning how to use a mirror modifier, which basically will cut this in half and copy it. And you only have to work on one side. And to be honest, if I was smarter, we would have done it that way, because that would have actually been a lot easier of a way to do it. It's a little more complex, and I'm not really that good at it, so I figured we just do it this old-fashioned way here. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and add a door, and what I want to do is go to the front of the model. So if you recall, let's hit the number 1 pad key, or the 1 on the number pad key here. Zoom in a little bit. I'm going to pan this up. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually use the 3D cursor to snap a new shape right in front or right onto this face that I'm circling here. So in order to do that, I want to select the face by right-clicking it. Make sure you're in face mode down here. You might be in line mode or vertex mode, and by the way, you can actually hold shift and click multiple ones of these. So you can click them all or click one or the other or have 2 or 3 on or whatever. But I want the face select mode, and I'm going to select the face. And I'm going to use the snapping options. And in order to call up the snapping options, you hold the shift key while in edit mode, and you press the S button, as in Sam. And what I want to do is I want to snap the cursor to what I've selected. So I'm going to go and select this option. And notice that the crosshairs, or the 3D cursor, is now over the center of our face. And I believe anytime you select a line or a face, that 3D cursor will snap into the mathematical center, I guess, of it. I'm not sure if that's exactly true. You can fact check me, I guess, on that, but for all intents and purposes, and from what I've seen, it will snap into the basic center of whatever you selected. So anyways, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and hold shift and click A and add a plane. Now, where did the plane go? Now, since we're in the front view, the plane has been added flat, so if we actually scroll up here, you can see the plane right there. So what we want to do is actually rotate this in 90 degrees towards us so that the plane is flat with the front face of this wall. So what I'll do is hit R for rotate, and then actually type in 90 for 90 degrees. Actually, I messed that up. Let's hit Control Z. I forgot to mention that you actually want to rotate this on an axis. So what we'll do here is we're going to move this plane so we can see it fully. And I'm going to hit Go and Y to move it a little bit out. And I'm going to also turn snapping off so I can show you what's going on here. So when you rotate something, these axes are almost like pipes or very thin pieces of whatever. And think of this plane as resting on that. And anytime you rotate this, it's going to rotate as if it was on like that pipe balancing. So for instance, if I say RX, we can rotate it this way. And notice how that red line will appear to kind of give you a guideline on what axis you snapped on. And another easy way to actually move this is, remember, this is kind of like a crank. So kind of turn this in clockwise and counterclockwise motions, and you'll get this to move real good. So conversely, if we did R and Y, we can actually move it to, on the Y axis, and RZ on the Z axis, and actually get that to spin like that. So we want to actually rotate this on the X axis. So we're going to hit RX 90 on our number pad and hit enter. And now we've actually rotated this plane directly on the X axis in 90 degrees. So it's actually perfectly perpendicular with our ground here. So our next step is, so what I've done is actually hit the number pad 3 to get in the side view mode, and I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan. Zoom in just a little bit, and I'm actually going to snap this so that it gets really close to this wall, almost right on it. So in order to do that, I'm going to hit the snapping button by hitting shift tab, and notice that the magnet turns on, and hit the G button and the Y, and we're just going to move this so that it's real close. And when I get close enough to this wall, almost a unit or so away, I'm going to hold the shift button so that I can even get it in smaller increments. So I think that should be real good. Get it as close as you can without really touching, and I think that's good. It's not going to be something that a user is going to see in game. So next thing I'm going to do is hit the line tool, or the line select button, and we're going to click this bottom line. But first, I'm actually going to bring this whole plane down to the bottom so that it's easier to figure out how tall we want to make this door. And if you recall in the last video, by holding hovering our cursor over this plane and hitting the L as in Lima, I'm on the line select, so I've got to be on a line here. Hold the L button, or press the L button, it'll select the entire piece or linked objects here. So now we'll hit GZ to go down the Z axis, and then move it right down to the bottom there, and that should be perfectly on the bottom plane of our ground. So now I'll click the top line, and I'll go into front mode by pressing 1. And I think I'm going to just hit G and Z right after that, so that we move it up and down onto this axis. And I'll move it one more block up. Actually, we'll leave it right here. That's about 3 units or 3 meters, which would be about 9 feet or so. Which would, I guess, be a good size for a door. Alright, so now the next thing I want to do is I actually want to move this plane and move the door over here. I don't want it dead center in the building. So I'm going to go back to the face select mode, click the face, G, and then X axis, and then move and snap this all the way right about there. Right about to the edge or the corner of the building here. That's where I want the door. You can choose anywhere you want to put this door at. And so what I want to do is actually duplicate this plane and rotate this so that it actually becomes a window. And that'll be an easy way to make this a window. So to duplicate, while this plane and only the plane is selected, you're going to hold shift and hit D. And once you do that, without clicking or doing anything else, you can now move this plane anywhere you want. The duplicate plane will now be moved anywhere you click. If you actually click an axis, so I want to move this on the X axis, so if I hit X right after that, without doing anything else after hitting Shift D, just hitting X, I can now move this duplicate perfectly on the X plane. So I'm going to move it right about here, and then move it up 1 or 2 units. Maybe right about there. Let's do right there. Now I'm going to go back to the line mode, and I'm going to drag this window over on the X by clicking G and then X. And I'm going to snap this over, I don't know, 2 or 3 units, make a wide window or something like that. So going back into front view, I think I like that. I'm just going to keep it like this for now. Maybe I'm going to move the door over a couple units. Hitting G and then X, I'll move it right about here. Alright. So the next thing I want to do is I want to make the same thing for this plane for a garage door. Now eventually I'm actually going to use the same plane and duplicate this and make windows up on the 2nd floor and maybe even this floor. But in order to make this UV unwrapping easy, I'm actually just going to make one of them right now. Any unique piece of this building, make one of. And then when I have to UV unwrap it, I only have to UV unwrap it once. and then when I go back into this model, I can duplicate any part that I need to duplicate. That's just an easy way to make this a little bit faster for you when you're modeling, so you're not having to unwrap every single window or every single element. You can just do it one time and then duplicate it later in the Blender scene so that it makes it a little easier. So what we want to do for this garage is actually duplicate this plane and kind of rotate it and restructure it a little bit. So we're going to actually duplicate by holding Shift D and hit X directly after that, so we can actually drag this over. Now I'm going to rotate this on the Z axis so that I can get this so that it faces, I don't know, this way. So we're going to hit R for rotate, Z, and then 90 degrees. And I don't know which way that rotated, so I'm actually going to check the normals out and see if it rotated. Yep, it rotated in the opposite direction. So actually, we're going to hit Control Z. If this will want to go back. Okay, we're going to duplicate this again, hit X, go down here. And now instead of doing 90 degrees positive, we're going to just do rotate Z negative 90. And now we're going to have our plane facing the correct direction. Unclick the normals now. And I'm going to go into the side view here by holding Control and hitting 3 on the number pad. And I'm going to just drag this over on the Y plane by using G and then Y to drag it over. I'm going to snap it by holding Shift right about there so it's even. And now I'm going to use the line tool and select the bottom line and then drag this down so it's even with our again our ground by pressing G and then Z. I had to use Shift again right here so it snaps in smaller increments so that it'll fit. Alright, and the next thing I think is this is a garage, so I'm actually going to make this just a little wider. So we're going to hit G, Y on this line and actually just snap it maybe to about right there. Okay, and then now we're going to go into the front view so that we can actually see this. Let's select the plane by going to plane face select. Select the plane, go into front view. Now let's kind of do the same thing we did with these things and snap it really close to the wall. As close as we can get it here without having to be too touching. I think that's about good. And now, like, notice in object mode you can't even see these planes. You know, they don't stick up or they don't do anything else, so that's kind of good. And one thing that I'm definitely keeping an eye out here is my try count. And up in Blender you can notice this up here. And I've actually targeted this for like about a 300 try model. It's going to be super tiny, and I'm doing everything I can to keep these tries down as well. I don't want this try count to get you know, as high as I can. Just because I can make this 1,000 or 2,000 tries. I mean, some people do, but I tend to try to keep my assets as low as possible. And I'm kind of a bad modeler anyway, so eventually they don't look exactly as professional maybe as they could be, but I figure with as many assets as people want to use, it's best to try to keep these numbers down, and it's always mindful for that. If you need to use tries and make geometry and spend detail and there's no other choice, then that's what you got to do, but think about everything you can to try to avoid using geometry if you can. And then there's other elements that you can't get away with, like these ledges for instance could probably be done maybe in normal mapping, but the geometry just is second to none when you actually want it to make it look good. So anyways, we've actually mapped out, or actually placed the window, the door, and the garage here. And some of these elements, like I said earlier, are going to be duplicated across these faces on both sides. But at this point we can go ahead into UV Unwrapping. So a quick way to get into the Unwrapping screen is to right click right about here on your screen until you get these area options. And I like to split my screen vertically like this. And some people like to split it horizontally, and you can do that by basically testing out where you can click and split the area. So I'm actually going to, now what happens when you do this is an exact copy opens up. So this is actually a good way to actually, if you wanted to change views when you're modeling, this is completely independent of this. So if you wanted to put this in wireframe mode and do things with this, you'll notice that everything gets clicked and moves around. So it's actually a really good tool if you wanted to learn how to do a setup here. You can alter views and change the way you look at your model in different ways without actually having to use your cameras. So again, that's another strategy and another thing to look up and research, is learn how to use these different views and perspectives. Very good. And again, you can go down to this view button down in the bottom left corner, and there's all of these different options here, along with all these other things. So basically, you can access so many different things in 3 different ways in Blender. So just remember that. But what we're going to do is go on to make sure your mouse is over here on this side and hit the little cube in the bottom left corner. And we're going to actually change this editor to the UV image editor. And it's going to upload blank. And what we're going to do is a couple things here. Is we're going to load a UV grid so that we can test our image and make sure that when we've scaled and unwrapped everything, the actual squares of our UV grid are about the same size, so that we're not kind of texturing in weird ways so that things look all warped when we actually upload our images. So the first thing to do is go down to this part of your screen, or you can click the new button, and we'll actually label this UV grid. And this is where you're going to have to make a very serious choice about the size and detail of your model. This model is going to be extremely simplistic, and 1024 by 1024 is usually the target size for a huge range of models. I mean, I would avoid using this size for props because of the size of the prop. You really don't need to use it unless you're using building props or something like that, or big things as a prop. But anyways, for this building, I'm actually going to use this as 512. So make sure that when you're thinking about your texture size, you're giving yourself enough space for your skill levels, but you're also thinking in mind part of the texture, or this part of your file in Steam is going to be the largest part. This is what kills the file sizes of a lot of great assets. From what my understanding is that a lot of the tries and graphics cards these days can take pretty decent amount tries on the models, but the textures, because of the way Unity and the game actually does things, amongst other reasons, are really what bloats the file sizes and really makes the rendering capacity harder on a computer. So again, try to make the texture sizes as small as you can possibly can. And again, you got to make a choice on sacrificing your quality and all your skill level, but there's some good guys out there that can do some amazing things on the smallest little textures. So just keep that in mind. And I actually messed this up by not changing this to a UV grid, so we're going to make a new one here. By doing that, that's a good way to let you know how to do that. So we just basically made a blank space, and what we want is actually a checkerboard. So hit this little plus sign, and we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to call this UV grid 2. And instead of making this a blank, we're going to go down here and hit UV grid. Let me move this up. So you're going to hit UV grid, and then click OK. And so notice now we have a checkerboard. So resize the windows how you like it here so that we can start unwrapping this shit. And the first thing I like to do is think logically in what gets the most space in game. What are you going to look at and see the most? So roofs and walls are usually the top portions that you're going to see. I mean, you're in game, you're looking at buildings like this most of the time. So we want to dedicate texture space mostly to the roof and the walls. So one thing I noticed is when we clicked on these things, we haven't assigned these pieces of our model to that actual texture yet. So an easy way to do that is go over to your model and make sure that your mouse is always in the work area that you want to be in, because if you're over here, it's not going to work if you're trying to affect something here. So click A and select the entire model, and go down here and just select your UV grid 2, or your UV grid 1 if you did it correctly. And so now when we click these individual items, everything will be on our same UV space, your UV grid 2. And again, this is just a test grid. We're just using this for Blender purposes. Eventually we're going to UV map everything out and export that to Gimp where we can texture it. But this is basically in-game or in Blender so that we can check it out and make sure that we can scale our UVs correctly and everything looks okay. So I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible. I'm starting to get high on the time here. So worst case scenario is we might actually split this into 2 segments, but if I'm crafty with this, we can do it in 1. So the first thing I'm going to do is, like I said earlier, is the one thing I noticed is this space right here. This is one plane, so we'd have to put one big texture here, and I actually want to split this up into 4. So I'm actually going to go over here to the tools and subdivide this. So what that allows me to do is take one piece here, and then I can actually make a seamless texture and copy that over and over again. So we can save texture space here. I could actually do that with these pieces because they're extremely long, and we're going to have to shrink these UVs, which will end up stretching them, and that's kind of a bad thing. But for this example, I think I'm just going to leave them, and we're going to stretch them onto like just a simple gray surface or something, and it won't be too bad. But if you actually have like a texture with like I don't know, a cement pattern or something that you actually want to show up, and you shrink these UVs or expand them, you're going to really alter the scaling here. So you'll see what I mean, and you'll see what you mean when you get through this. But the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and use a few different methods at unwrapping this thing. But the first way is I'm going to go and project from view. So I'm going to actually zoom in to like a decent level here, and I'm going to go to top view. And in top view, I'm going to select the 4 faces of the roof, and unwrap, you're going to hit the U key while you're in the model area. And what I'm going to do is use the option project from view, and what that will do is actually project the UVs by the way I'm looking at it. And so if you notice here on the UV side, our UVs are now projected onto the UV map. So I'm going to hit A over here and select all those UVs and move these out of the way so we can kind of see what we're doing. We're going to scale everything and kind of arrange everything later. So I kind of just throw it off to the side. Anyways, the next thing I do is I usually like to hide what I've done on the model. So if I've already unwrapped something, I hide it. That makes it easier for us to do this. And I just noticed we didn't delete the bottom of this. So what we're going to do is actually delete the bottom of this building. That will never be seen, so we don't have to unwrap it either. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is the walls. What I want to do for these walls though is I want to do this face and unwrap them the same, this face, and unwrap them at the same time. What that will allow me to do is stack these UVs and use a simple texture for both walls. And since this is just going to be brick with these windows textures, or these window planes laid over it, and these garage and door planes laid over it, we don't have to worry about actually texturing individual doors onto this thing. So we can get away with doing this. So I'm going to select the side walls here, anything I want brick, and again I'm going to go into the side view by hitting 3, and I'm going to go ahead view and hit project from view, and now we've got our projection out here. And again I'm going to select A, hit everything, click G, and then Y to just move these straight down. You'll notice they have gaps in them because we didn't actually unwrap these pieces, and we've extruded these pieces earlier. So the extrusions don't actually come out until we unwrap these pieces. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually use my camera pan views, the ones that are preset. So I'm going to use the number 4 and actually pan in perfect distance away. And what this will do is not mess up the scale between the front and the sides of this unwrapping. If I actually move the camera now, the scale of this front might differ, and it's actually going to be a bigger pain to rescale this. So in order to keep the distance and everything kosher here, I'm going to actually use the camera pan views like 4, 6, 8, and 2 to move around the building until we're done unwrapping these pieces. So now that we've got the sides unwrapped, I'm going to click the front and then pan around by using 4 and 6, and then unwrap the back here, or click the back and then click U and unwrap, project from view, and then do the same thing, click A and then move these out of the way. And then I'm going to hide all of these pieces like I said earlier, so I know I'm done with them. Alright, so the next piece I want to do is these like accent pieces, and these are kind of complicated because there's actually several portions to one thing I noticed too is actually that it looks like we have some faces on the inside of these that we can delete, and I'm going to go ahead and before we move on is delete all of those inner faces, not only so that we don't have to render those tries and to keep the try count down, but that's also something we don't have to unwrap. And again, do yourself a favor and go through your model and make sure you're deleting everything that isn't going to be seen in game. Notice how I am leaving the bottoms of these though, because those will, or potentially could be rotated under or something and could be seen. So just keep that in mind. But anything on the inside of your model, I mean the faces and the geometry there are just wasting space, and you don't need it. So you want to be careful about how you do it too, because I've actually gone through and deleted some stuff that I needed later. So just be careful when you're going through wireframe mode deleting things like that. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to unwrap these sides first, and then unwrap these sides, and then I'm going to go to the top view and unwrap the tops. And that'll make sure that everything gets kind of unwrapped nicely, and then we can bunch everything up and shrink it so that it fits into one texture. So I'm going to hit 3 to go into the side view, and then I'm just going to pan with the shift and middle mouse and select all of these front faces. Use the 6 button to go all the way around, and then do the same thing here. And then hit unwrap, project from view. I'm going to select all of these and move these out of the way. And I messed up by moving the mouse actually, so don't do that. And then I'm going to hit H to hide these, and then I'm going to now move around again to the front. And I'm actually going to use the B for box select. And if you left click and drag, you can now select fronts of these. So I'm going to do it this way. And then use 6 and 4 to pan around and do the same thing for the fronts here. Alright, and then I'm going to hit U and project from view to unwrap. Click A and move all of these down. Hide these, and now I'm going to hit 7 and go to the top view. And I'm going to use now wireframe mode, so I actually can select everything through this and then box select everything here. And I believe we've got everything there. We actually got some strays here, so these pieces here I do not want. So I'm going to go back into wireframe mode, click B, but instead of left clicking, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button and drag, and that deselects what I've got. Alright, and so now I'm going to go back into 7 for top view, and I'm going to unwrap these from the top like that. And then highlight these and then move these off to the side. Hide that. Alright, so now what we have is we've got all these extra pieces actually. I forgot to go into wireframe mode from the top view, so we didn't select those. Let's go back into the top view here and carefully panning, and I'm going to undo that selection. I'm going to go back into wireframe mode and select all of these extra pieces that I missed on the first go here because of my oops, that's the window. It's my incompetence here, I guess. I don't know what these pieces are. We're going to find out here real soon. And then we're going to move down here like that. Okay, so we actually selected these, which we do not want. Alright, so now we're going to go back into 7 and then unwrap, project from view. Now we've got something that we want. And we're going to move this off to the side. Hide that. And now we've got just the top block, the windows and the doors. So for this piece, I'm going to actually unwrap this very similar, but because of time constraints, I'm actually going to do this very quickly. So what I'm going to do is do a cheat mode and hit wireframe mode, select everything, and I'm actually going to unwrap using Smart UV Project. Now what this will do is tell Blender to unwrap this for me by using some standard rules here for how it should unwrap things. So it's taking this angle limit and doing some magic and saying, okay, this is how we're going to unwrap it. So if we do that, notice how everything over here is now unwrapped, but it's kind of in this weird, funky way, so we're going to have to do some stuff to this later, but for time constraints, again, I'm going to just do it this way. Alright, and then we're going to hide, and then now what we're going to do is select all 3 of these faces and just unwrap these all together. Alright, so now we've got everything unwrapped. So if we go ahead and go to our model side and click Alt-H, we can unhide everything, and notice how if we zoom out here, I did a bad job at making sure these were spread out, but we've got all of our model unwrapped in 2D format. So now this is ready to be placed on this grid, and we can try to get this texture or UV'd up so we can get it textured. So in the next video, what we'll do is finish up the UV unwrap and texture this, and then go ahead in the last video do an import into the game and then kind of finish up with all this. So anyways, I hope you found this informative, and we'll stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for watching.